Hello, guys. Welcome to this new edition of Mind Podcast. This is Aadit Kapadia coming to you on yet another day with a fascinating discussion topic. And joining me today on Mind Podcast from Singapore is columnist, economist, analyst, writer who writes on various financial topics. Nirav Kanodra. I know he looked at me funny when I introduced him as an economist, but I'll tell you why I did that very deliberately, right? Because yeah, this whole notion of economists being just the ones with the degree, I want to take that out. Anyone who write on economic policy, in my opinion, is probably, if we don't want to use the word, we'll say writes on economic policy.
Fair enough. So
Yeah.
thank you for having me.
So because you had that, you're like, अरे मुझे क्या economist बना रहे हो यार? No, but Nirav writes on various issues from policy to current affairs to some historical perspective as well as on trends going across the world, and has written for mind makers as well. And always someone whose perspective I look forward to. So welcome to Mind Podcast, Nirav.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, it's a strange time to have sort of discussions also on macro issues, right? Because the world is almost dealing with such micro issues that people do not, pardon my language, but they don't give a damn about anything that's happening in other parts of the world. That's just how it is, right?
Yes.
And with the coronavirus situation, what has happened is the world has been struck in waves as well. So in US, where I am based, you had the situation where last year was horrible. I personally was COVID positive last December. That was our second wave in US. But Singapore, where you are, was relatively okay. But now you're in middle of another lockdown, a second lockdown in Singapore. And this happens to be in the same week when Biden said that if you've taken 2 shots, or the CDC said if you've taken 2 shots, you can roam around without a mask in the open. So that's how polar opposite the world has become within itself.
No, totally agree. Totally agree. I think what has happened is you're seeing a lot of localized effects because obviously movement of people is a lot more tougher. The quarantine rules have kind of made international travel very difficult, especially like in East Asia, where quarantine has gone up from 14 to 21 days in most of the countries. I think China still has a 21-day quarantine, and Singapore has from 14 to 21-day quarantine for most countries. So obviously, I think in the US, it managed the COVID crisis badly, but it's done vaccination quite well. But I still don't think we might be out of the woods globally. Obviously, in India, the situation is a lot worse, but probably improving. So I just saw the stats. I think yesterday was 283,000 numbers, or 283,000.
Yeah.
So it's gone down from the peak of 4 lakh cases a day. But if you look at the internal distribution by districts, what has happened is the big cities have come off quite a bit, but it's spreading to tier 2 towns and tier 3 towns and villages, etc. Right? So where data quality as well as healthcare capacity is a lot worse, and I think what it does is you will have probably the death toll or the health impact will remain sustained for a while. I personally think we might not see like a very sharp peak, but a slow plateau down in India. So yes, everywhere it is localized. Everywhere, I think it's like fighting a war, and you have like one battle going on. This is a world war. This is a world war.
This is absolutely.
You have like few localized battles going on. So you have like, for example, in East Asia, there's a different battle going on. In like in the US or Europe, a different battle is going on. So I think yes, we will see these waves come and go.
Yeah, and especially in India, this is interesting what Nirav said, that the numbers have gone down to about almost 280, 270,000. But the death numbers still remain around 4,100 and stuff like that. And that is also because the new positives might be less, but people who have been, like, as we saw so many cases, like journalist Sunil Jain, who tragically passed away 2 days ago, he had been in the hospital for over 2 weeks, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And so many people like those who are out of the 14-day period are affected. I lost my own grandmother 3-4 weeks ago, and she was, I think, 10th or 11th day after she was positive. I'm not. So the convention that after a week or so, things get better in COVID itself has been rewritten in what we've seen in India because of the new strain and so forth.
Yes. Also, I think in India, the other sad thing is uh, due to either over medication, due to steroids or like comorbidities, what has happened is people have some of them have recovered from COVID but died of like other complications.
Yep,
The
absolutely.
recent one is mucormycosis, so like
Yeah,
black fungus,
the black
etc. So,
fungus, right?
so hopefully, I think, see, this is, as you mentioned, see, this is like war, and everybody right now is thinking how to go ahead day to day and like just thinking here and now. But maybe if I change tack and look at things that once we are past this. So again, like as you said, like this is a historical parallel. I think the closest historical parallel I would say is actually World War II, and after World War II as well, where you had like a lot of devastation, especially like in Europe and like in China and Japan and in parts of East Asia.
East Asia, yeah.
So I think what you have to see is once this is out, how do we get out of it? And if you want to be optimistic, then you could say that after World War II, you had like a very big global boom. I think there was like a big transformation. You had the US funded a lot of it via the Marshall Plan,
Yeah.
but besides that, once the whole feeling, there will be optimism that this is past us, and we will see some sort of a boom. Obviously, if you see looking at India specifically, I think that there will be something, a phenomenon called hysteresis. So it's a phenomenon used more in metallurgy, but like also in economics, where you pass something through a lot of stress, and it comes out slightly different, right? So I think what one effect we might see is everybody after going through like 3 months of lockdowns last year, a lot of restriction in mobility, and again like new lockdowns almost everywhere in the country. Uh, Especially the lower end of the spectrum, will be thinking, how can I save maybe 2 3 months or middle class or upper middle class? Everyone wants to have like 6 months to a year of consumption as savings for an emergency. So what is going to happen is immediate consumption might be reduced, and there will be a lot of savings. And now, what the government as well as like the private sector has to do is boost investment and boost like government spending. That is to prime the pump. So
Absolutely. And then you've given me my perfect segue because that's what we wanted to build this podcast about. Now, as people who followed this Mind podcast, like we've done a podcast with Amit Thadani, who's a doctor in Mumbai, on healthcare, on situation in COVID, what the frontline workers are doing. We are probably going to do another few podcasts on healthcare coming forward and stuff. But I also want to focus on the other issues. What happens in an emergency is we are so focused on the healthcare aspect of it and the survival aspect of it, as we should be, that we forget other issues or we forget to discuss about other issues. So we are just going to shift focus a little bit and talk about COVID, but in an economic standpoint, where there has been economic devastation in various parts of the world. In some places, lockdown was the only option, but the lockdown has also led to some heavy economic costs that the countries have to pay. And they thought that in the next year they'll be able to make up the ground, but the second wave has been even worse than the first wave. So how do you deal with that, and how do you bounce back of the situation? So to kick things off, Nirav, you and I happen to be in two of the biggest port cities in the world, right? I'm in Houston and you're in Singapore. So it is but obvious that we'll start discussion with economics, infrastructure, ports, and so forth, right? So how, when you talk about exports, imports, trade, right, that has been probably the most affected in the COVID situation. Yes, there has been medicinal exports. Yes, there has been other good stories, positive stories, but basic trade has suffered. So how do you overcome the deficit, or have we lost some industries to COVID permanently?
no, so I don't think some industries are lost to COVID. I think the industries which have a lot of human contact, I would say, like management consulting or like salespeople who used to travel around either within a country or like across countries. A lot of that has been replaced by technology and like Zoom. You are in Houston, I am in Singapore, and we're talking over like out like
Yes.
this, right? So I think
Yes.
that has changed these things. For like goods, what has happened is the supply chains, a lot of them, global supply chains are controlled by China. A lot of pharmaceuticals, so active pharmaceutical ingredients, APIs, are only made in China, and there's a monopoly. I think all companies globally will start looking at how can I build resilience in my supply chain. So since the 80s, focus was how do I reduce my costs? How do I reduce my cost? How do I improve efficiency? And that has come at the cost of resilience. And I think resilience is how well can you react to one shock? If there is an earthquake somewhere, if there is a cyclone somewhere, there is a union strike somewhere, I could lose my critical raw materials, and that you've seen even in the manufacture of vaccines, right?
Correct.
Some law
Absolutely.
change, you could see a duty increase. So what you want is you want at least another parallel line. So what is going to happen is also the costs will go up because of people will have to build in more redundancy. You will have to have another parallel supply chain in case of any issues. And so this has been very much amplified due to COVID. I don't think industries will be lost, but you will see also this is an opportunity. So India has deindustrialized since the 80s quite rapidly, and a lot of that has actually gone to China. And now what will happen is out of political compulsion for jobs, locally in India, a lot of chief ministers, etc., will be fighting to try and get projects in. This is going to have a K-shaped recovery. And so you see like one arm of the K which is going up, which is the ones which are doing well will do a lot better. The one arm which is going down is going to do a lot worse. So that's where government spending has to come in. But I'll give you examples that now specifically going for India, you are seeing the PLI schemes, production linked incentives. So trying to promote manufacturing in like pharma, automobiles. One specific one where India is not a leader is actually advanced chemistry, cell or like battery technology.
Right.
So we are moving towards an electric future. There are a lot of electric two-wheelers. So some industries might have like issues because of demand, but this is we're seeing some transformation. So
Correct.
I'm very bullish about electric two-wheelers specifically because short run, very much urban. You can charge it from your home. So you're seeing the traditional players like Bajaj and Hero
Right.
Motors, and new ones like Ola and Ather. So I think that is quite a big thing. And what you will see is earlier some projects which were being opposed on local grounds, and now I'll give examples from Maharashtra. There are two projects which have been in the pipeline forever, both in the Ratnagiri district. One is the refinery at Nanar, and there is a nuclear power plant at Jaitapur. What has happened is due to unemployment, due to the harsh realities of COVID, the ground situation has changed, and a politician, now chief minister, has kind of flipped. It's not because he's changed his view; it is
Right.
because
Right.
people have changed their view. So what has happened is you will see this kind of change coming in, where people who were like earlier opposed, or like some farmers who were opposed to selling their land for industrial use, we might see that flip around.
So
And
so what you were saying, Nirav, and I just want to kind of show our viewers this. Basically, what Nirav was referring to, a K-shaped recovery would be something like this. You
yes,
know, I mean, this is again, I have this is a graph from Investopedia. I have nothing to do with it. This is just representational purposes in case someone is like, hey, wow, what are you trying to show? But basically this is what a lot of people are saying, that the industries that will go up will continue to go up, and the industries that may have been affected will continue. And in would you say we are almost in this sort of phase right now, or do you think this is we might be in a recession and we don't know it yet?
no, I think given like this time, a lot of the mobility restrictions are a bit softer than last year. So I think we are closer to the bottom. I would say the night is always darkest before the dawn. You know, like
Yeah, absolutely.
exactly right. So
Things
I
get
think,
worse before they get better, kind of deal.
but I think we might be at the turning point. We've already seen in the number of cases that we are at a turning point. So yes. Also, like I'll give another example, which might have changed for good. Is earlier like going to the cinema was quite a social experience, right? You
Yeah,
go to a cinema, go out for dinner. It's
yeah.
a nice thing. What has happened is you're seeing a lot more. content being consumed over streaming platforms.
Correct.
So, like, not just like Netflix and Amazon Prime, like specifically for India, you have a lot of good content coming on local uh,
Yeah.
OTT platforms, right?
Yeah.
So
You have
you've got
Hotstar, Sony Live,
Hotstar,
which is
Sony
so
Live.
many.
Exactly, exactly. So what might happen is the movie industry, which is making like very big budget blockbusters, like one movie costing like 100 crores,
Hmm.
uh, etc. You will have like 10 small TV series costing 10 crores each, and then so I think there's going to be some sort of a dispersion. So in this K shape, the lower one is like entertainment, hospitality, food services.
Hmm.
So I think some of that goes is hit. You
So
might see less dining out, more of delivering and eating in. So I think
even for travel, I would say that it is making a recovery. I traveled last week and took a short trip, and I took a flight and everything, and I think travel has the flight was full. It's pretty much getting to a point where airports in US at least are getting back to normalcy, 60-70% capacity. And I personally think for them to say the mask rule, it might also have been something to do with us, the US being 3 weeks to the summer break, the Memorial Day. So it gives people enough time to get vaccinated, fully vaccinated before summer and travel. So I think travel, hospitality is coming back too, because people are going to hotels and stuff. And food services is interesting because just like how OTT has evolved, you have had Uber Eats, and in India you have I forget Swiggy and
Swiggy.
Swiggy and all these. So I think even these, that is why I feel we are probably in a recovery mode, if not at the bottom, because these four industries have started evolving. And I always believe that travel and the hospitality are the first two industries to evolve, because they have to serve the people, so they will have to evolve. They have no option.
No, absolutely. I think there'll also be some sort of like a what do you call like revenge consumption on travel. You've missed it for so long. Yeah. So I think, see, if you've got like family members, you've got friends living in other parts of the world, you haven't for like almost over a year if you haven't traveled
Hmm,
anywhere.
hmm,
So I think there is going to be some quick bump up.
hmm,
And actually, like in terms of like actual recovery, so for the formal sector in India, the best indicator is like the monthly GST collections.
hmm, hmm,
So in this wave, they haven't actually fallen yet. I think
hmm,
the informal sector is hit very hard,
hmm,
and so yes, we don't have like a very good idea about those things.
hmm,
Also, like people, all businesses have also adapted to the new normal. So
hmm.
even like small businesses, manufacturing is actually open right now.
Right.
So because last year they realized that okay, you say oh pharma manufacturing is okay, but what about the guy who provides like a glass bottle to them? Oh, glass
Hmm.
manufacturing is not okay. It's not critical industry, and you had a
Correct.
lot of supply chain bottlenecks.
Hmm.
Because of these things, you also saw inflation rise all of last year in India.
Yeah.
Versus the Western world where it is demand driven. In India, it is like supply shock. So
Hmm.
uh, people had to pay up prices,
Hmm.
and now what you're seeing is the bottlenecks and the supply chain is open.
Hmm.
So I think that is an improvement. Another thing is what you could say, like turning a crisis into an opportunity
Hmm.
is India right now is like the laboratory for effectiveness of all sorts of vaccines. So not only that, two domestic ones like AstraZeneca producing Serum Institute, as well
Correct.
as uh, uh, Bharat Biotech
Huh.
producing vaccine. You are
Hmm.
having like Dr. Reddy's will manufacture Sputnik.
Hmm.
Zydus Cadila is hopefully getting approval soon. Novavax might get approval soon.
Hmm.
J&J has a local partner, Biologics E.
Hmm. Hmm.
So what's going to happen is you will go out a little bit on war footing. Vaccination
Hmm.
pace will step up,
Hmm.
and this is also an advertisement for Indian pharma industry. And
Yes.
if you take it as an opportunity, see, I think
Indeed.
if you look at the rich countries in the world have already almost been vaccinated.
Yeah.
But I think if you go towards the global south, a lot of poor countries they're importing vaccines either from like China or like hopefully later on from India.
Yeah.
And
I was just sorry, keep going. I was just going to show the GST collections, how they surged to about 1.41 lakh crore in April. And the ministry has said that they've actually gone up, of which CGSTs, I mean, you can see the figures right here, guys. I can zoom in for everyone to look at the numbers. But essentially, despite the second wave affecting, I think it has gone up significantly.
yes, so I think like the numbers in May, what's collected in May might actually show a fall from the 1.41 lakh crores.
Hmm.
Earlier, pre-COVID, the run rate was about like more than 1 lakh crores was like a good number.
Correct.
And I think
Yeah.
what has happened is we see more formalization of the economy, so that's why tax
Mm,
collection is going up. But yes, I think so. That's one good number. I think like that's one sentiment indicator that
mm,
where the economy is going, and we get it like timely, so every
mm,
month.
mm,
So
mm.
that's a good thing.
That's a
Uh,
good thing. Yeah. But
so
but
I
in
think
India, sorry, go on. Yeah, yeah.
no, so continuing on that part, right? So I think on like pharma, once like India gets the size of India vaccinated with 1/6 of the world, all the additional capacity, either for booster doses if you might need them, for like other countries like in Africa, a lot of Eastern Europe, a lot of like Southeast Asian countries, the poorer ones. There's a huge size of population, and
Mm,
I think that's an export opportunity as well
mm.
as that kind of integrates India into like the global manufacturing supply chain.
Correct.
And this is an opportunity for Indian companies to step up. I think a little bit of like we've seen a lot of haggling on like say vaccine prices, etc.
Mm,
But like I
mm,
think the cost of vaccine, whether it is 150 rupees or 600 rupees or 1,000 rupees,
mm,
is a lot less versus the cost of getting COVID. I think
mm,
an oxygen cylinder goes for like about 50,000 rupees.
mm,
Your medication goes on, so the cost goes out in lakhs. And
correct.
there is not enough capacity. I think just impaired earnings for even like if you recover in 2, 3 weeks is worth a
Mm,
lot more. I think
mm,
uh, the communication has been quite poor out here from the government. I think a lot of people, opposition parties, everyone just uses this as a point.
mm,
But what we need is more vaccines, faster vaccination, and more production. So supply curves slope upward. If there is
yeah.
higher price, we will see more supply. So I
No, and I
think
think it's also something to do with the raw materials and the issue around that with the whole, U.S. situation. But I think that you raise an important point that it seems like this is almost like a chain reaction connected to each other. You start with the vaccine thing that boosts your local pharmacy, manufacturing industry, that boosts your trade in that, and then India is going to even sell vaccinations to other countries. So you are raising revenue, and then you can use that revenue to compensate for things which you. But when you talk about informal industry, especially in India, something that has deeply been affected is the wedding industry, right?
yeah,
And I mean, there are a lot of people that are going to be like scoffing at the industry. It is an industry, right? From the
yes, yes,
catering, the photography, to everything, to even the honeymoon destinations after, right? I mean, those are based on tourism, post wedding tourisms. And Maldives got a lot of people going in, and Goa got a lot of people this winter. But right now the tourism has virtually become zero. So that has affected a lot of small things. So those informal industries, I don't think, can recover in the next 1 year, because I just don't think people are going to have such big lavish weddings, at least in the near 6 or 12-month period.
oh yeah, absolutely. Like things like
Hmm.
uh, what a lot of people don't even know. Like you have a lot of these corporate conferences or sales conferences.
Yes.
So a lot of companies. I think there was one big like in a negative light, but like Eureka Forbes, the biggest sales agents, they were took them to the Australian cruise, and there was like another
Hmm.
one which was I think Manikchand Gutka or one of the Gutka companies. I don't know
Hmm.
which one. So
Hmm.
all those
Uh,
things will be
that Star Cruises that used to go to
yes,
Singapore was very famous. That companies
yes,
would rent out the whole place for 3 months or something like that.
yes,
Or
yes,
sorry,
exactly.
3 days, not 3 months. I mean,
Yeah, 3 days to each different companies, etc. Right? So
yes.
those have while they've gone, I think so. In Singapore, you have the cruise to nowhere because very strict border controls. You have like a 21-day quarantine if you go anywhere. But if you take a COVID test, you can board onto a cruise, goes around and brings you back in like 4 days, and it's a cruise to nowhere. I think there's a
Yeah,
lot of entertainment on board. I think
yeah,
some of the cruise liners in Goa, etc., you could see some of those things.
yeah,
You will also so this is the way they adapt. As you said, yes, it's not going to be at the same level as before,
yeah,
and this also tells you like how like people have to either adapt or you need to build like resilience. I'm coming to this word again and again. I think probably all these people who are in the informal sector actually need to have more savings, or they need to have like family members who have like different sources of income. Everybody cannot be in the same industry because if you are all in the same industry, so as you pointed out, like say if somebody's just a caterer, his like spouse, somebody's a photographer, one is a wedding planner, then everybody linked to the same industry, everybody sees the downturn together.
Yeah.
And I think this is, as a society, uh, like India in general needs to also see that. See what had happened. If you see uh, Indian economy at a very broad level,
Mhm.
what we have been dealing is on all the factors of GDP. We've been only focusing on like consumption
Mm,
and
mm,
domestic consumption. We consumed a lot more than which what we produced or sold abroad,
mm.
and that was being funded by foreigners buying Indian equities. And
Correct.
our biggest export was IT services,
Mm,
and so we export IT services. We consume a lot of manufactured goods, a lot of
yes.
electronics, so mobile phones,
Mm,
etc. We consume quite a lot of oil.
mm.
Actually, like compared to like our size of GDP, our oil intensity is actually quite low, so we are not as productive per barrel of oil that we consume.
Correct.
So I think what was that is we were funding it just by these two sources, so IT exports and uh, foreigners buying our stocks, and
Mm,
this is not sustainable.
mm.
So that's why you
Absolutely.
need like, so you need multiple industries.
Mm,
We are so the PLI schemes in manufacturing. You have seen schemes where Foxconn and Pegatron are setting up factories to assemble Apple iPhones. So maybe
mm.
we start a bit with import substitution, but the scale that India has, we can export quite a bit as well. So
Correct.
that is one of those things, and that is where, like say, government policy. You need
Mhm.
this going down to a couple of levels.
Mm,
You want chief ministers lobbying to get industries in their state, and within that you want like local MLAs or like local districts fighting to get it in their district. And I
mm,
think what is needed is like everyone is in together and all
mhm,
forces aligned.
mm,
One of the positive signs we've seen is we've seen in India railway freight pick up a lot because passenger traffic has gone down,
mm,
and railway freight is like a lot cheaper for logistics.
mhm.
We are seeing two dedicated freight corridors come up. They're almost like the western dedicated freight corridor from Delhi to Mumbai is about like 60% open. A lot of it till Gujarat is open. So the ports in Gujarat, in Kandla, Mundra, etc., will
Mm,
have like direct access
mm,
inside. I think towards Bombay, land acquisition, certain parts is remaining. So what you will see is these are the things which kind of they add oil into the machinery. You know, they're reducing friction,
mm,
and that takes off some capacity from roads. You are also seeing a lot of expressway construction. So
mm.
because of GST, you reduce the need for border checks. I think one
Mm.
of my pet peeves, one state which has to have border checks is Gujarat, which due to alcohol bans, I think it's a pet peeve. If they remove that, you see an immediate increase in tax collection, which can be used for more productive investment.
I totally agree, and they can do it in a structured manner. They can. I personally have said that if you don't want to okay liquor in urban centers, in certain hotels, restaurants, allow beer and wine, or allow certain types, like where there are hotels in Ahmedabad and Baroda with. I'm not sure in Baroda, but in Ahmedabad I know for sure with liquor shops. I was like, those hotels can be allowed to have bars, and then whatever tax you charge on that, make sure you fund it for many things. But it seems to be that emotional issue that I personally have not connected with. And I mean, but I've shouted from the rooftops even when I was 16 or 17. And before people say, not because I wanted a drink in Gujarat, I could have gotten a drink anywhere after I turned of appropriate age. But it's just that I think we are missing out on a potential huge stream of revenue.
Yes. So no, so absolutely. Also, like the friction at every border check post,
Hmm.
that someone has to come check. Maybe there is a bit of harassment. There are some bribes paid. So all of that kind of friction, as well as actual like diesel consumption, because the
Yeah,
truck is left idling there, right? It could have gone
yeah,
like 20 kilometers ahead in
yeah.
that time. So I think all of that. So,
No,
but
and
this
if
is
you
the good.
remember, sorry, Nirav, coming back to this, but if you remember in Ahmedabad, back in the day, I'm talking about 2000s, you had an issue with octroy and things like that.
Yes.
So there was one octroy duty, one other duty, and things like that. And I think that changed in the late 2000s, where they merged it and made it through a very simple approval and that just removed so many bottlenecks.
Yes, no. So I think Mumbai was the last city to remove octroi just
Oh,
before GST, and I think octroi was like an outdated concept where you want to promote manufacturing inside the city. Actually, it's better if it's manufactured outside, and
yeah.
land needs to be better
And
used in
this,
urban
as
settings.
when Narendra Modi was the CM, but this was one of his pet peeves that there is one Naka in on Gujarat and Maharashtra border where the Gujarat tax collections are a lot more than the Maharashtra tax collections, and he's like, number of vehicles to equally aate hai, so what is the difference? What is going on? And that's how he said that he had removed a lot of bottlenecks and things like that in that.
Yes,
But yeah, that is, but what that's to sort of merge all the points. That's what Nirav, you're saying, that ultimately we have to incentivize consumers as well as manufacturers, and have to move to a state that's not known as like a tax terrorist state, if I may
yes. Oh
use.
no, so absolutely. I think see, we are facing like
Yeah.
I think there is an echo of the like it's not an echo boom, it's like an echo bust actually. Like
Mm,
so the issues what happened is after the financial crisis in 2008, tax collections like dropped massively. And
mm,
at that time, I think everybody was given targets, and it's an unfortunate fact. But like, even if I'm speaking from uh,
mm.
anecdotal evidence, that they went attacking like foreign companies to just meet their tax budget. I think there's a case with Kane Energy which is still going on,
Yeah.
and that negatively affects. So it's not about the tax that you collect right now. There's a very big Vodafone case.
Yeah, the retrospective taxation case.
So exactly, I think so. What needs to be done is
Mm,
like government has to like what they've done with like GST, where they reduced the friction between state borders, and instead of collecting many taxes, actually it's one tax but many slabs. Maybe
yeah.
we need to like reduce those slabs. I think government finances obviously will be under a bit of stress because your revenue has gone down from a lot of areas. A lot of PSUs have seen their salary and pension bills are the same. So like Indian
Mm,
Railways is one, but like their revenue from passenger traffic has fallen off a cliff. So I think, but what the government can do exactly as you like pointed out, where you want to put grease the wheels, grease the gears, and make things little with little less friction.
mm,
You could see like in terms of policy there is a lot of discretion on like whether something is category A or B or C, and like
mm,
what tax should be charged on that. I think rationalizing of like tax slabs on like on indirect taxes like GST, as well as the promise where what they've done is like no increase in income taxes,
mm,
and what they've done is hopefully the growth which comes back
mm.
pays for it in
Yeah.
greater tax revenue. uh, you need like basically, I think if you look at the sectors as well,
Mm,
uh, India is very much a service economy and
mm,
an agrarian economy by number of people involved,
mm,
but like you hollowed out like the manufacturing, the secondary sector. So
mm,
primary and tertiary is good. So I think that needs a lot of attention. That is a big employment generator. One of the things because of remote working, etc. I think
mm,
uh, more people, at least in the service sector, in IT industry, etc., could be incentivized to move out of like tier one cities. And if you can work from home, you can work from a satellite campus. So
absolutely.
there should be encouragement for like a lot of IT companies to set up satellite campuses in tier two cities where
Mm,
people could work from home as well as come in on a few days, maybe do a 3-2 kind of a thing
mm,
on
mm,
a weekly basis.
mm.
And also, the construction industry is a big employment generator. So construction not just of like government projects, roads, railways, etc. I think construction of residential real estate after
Mhm.
work from home, one of the side effect is the people who are on the upward sloping the part of the K-shaped recovery, they have a lot
Right.
more income, and
Mm,
now they feel I need to have a home office, I need to have a slightly bigger home. And because of this, you will see there's increased real estate demand. You saw Mumbai actually reduced stamp duty for from 5% to 2%, and you saw the registrations go up quite a bit. And so it went from like 5 to 2, and then 2 to 3, and now it's back to 5. But That was like as a temporary basis to
Temporary
keep the.
relief, yeah. People were
Yeah.
saving, like if you're doing like a few, like and in Mumbai it's very hard in the expensive areas to get like a flat lower than 5 crores, right?
Yes.
So if you get a 3 BHK, people were getting, right, guys, that this is not me being tone deaf, this was happening. You were saving like about 6-7 lakhs or something just in stamp duty. So that is why there was a huge
So,
rush.
yeah, so it was an incentive that do it now, and
Yeah,
because also it was time bound,
yeah.
so people rushed towards it who were like sitting on the fence. And so yes, I think construction, a lot of urban cities, which have like grown very fast, I think they
Hmm.
need a little bit better urban planning and probably policies such as redevelopment. Me being originally from Mumbai, a lot of buildings are like over 40, 50 years old, and now they are a little bit dilapidated. There are also buildings that are 100 years old, and there is a decent policy, which is if you redevelop an old building, you get extra FSI, that's floor space index. I think these policies need to be revisited. And how can you add that? They've done good things. That if something you give up some land for road widening, you get additional FSI. You give up some land for like, or you have like 3-4 levels of public parking, then you get still further FSI. And there is something called transfer of development rights (TDR),
Mhm.
where I break down one building, I build another building here, but the
Mhm.
extra square footage, maybe I cannot build it here, I can build it elsewhere.
Huh.
And I think these kind of policies need to be taken, not just like these work quite well in Mumbai where real estate is very expensive, but also in
Mhm.
other cities. I think there is some sort of an urban renewal needed.
Yeah.
And so if the government takes on these paths,
Hmm.
this is like self-fund financing streams of income.
Yeah.
So you have
And
construction.
pushing it at a very local level, because you don't have to
Yes,
create national policies. You have to actually just have meetings with certain state finance ministers, and hammer out, like, maybe have a sort of a discussion with mayors of the top 10 most densely populated cities of India. Who knows,
yes,
like, you can have that.
exactly.
And yeah, so I mean, and
But also,
and when
so
sorry,
things
what?
like no, things like metro construction, we are already seeing in like about 25 cities in the
Hmm.
country, right? So I think these kind of things, because what will happen is as like COVID is very localized, similarly, I think the recovery, each one takes it upon themselves that each area that how can
Hmm. Hmm.
we boost something. I
Hmm.
think in India, biggest problem is job creation, but there are
Hmm.
two types of that as well. One is the type which they say, okay, let's employ everyone in some government organizations or
Hmm.
PSUs without any additional productivity. See,
Correct.
that is an entitlement scheme. That is the
Ah,
original urban NREGA, right?
and regard.
That
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hmm.
so this is the urban NREGA. Instead of rural,
Yeah.
it's the urban one where you thought, okay, you got a job for life, and then
Yeah.
you vote for the political party which got you the job for life, and so that, but that is not sustainable. What we need is jobs which add productivity, add more value than
Mhm.
whatever costs are going inside,
Mhm.
and I think that's what. So you should have like more localized setting. I think the policy, some of them
Mhm.
which have been like broad based, saying that we will incentivize the production linked incentives. Actually, it's
Mhm.
incentives on like tax.
Yeah.
So if anyways, Foxconn was not manufacturing in India, so they're paying zero tax. So now if they
Mhm.
set up a factory and they get a tax holiday for a few years and linked to the amount of things that they produce, that's actually like not a bad thing because they're creating jobs as a positive externality, and
Correct.
more of these policies need to be put in. And
Absolutely.
like basically we need to also raise the animal spirits. Right now it is looking very grim. I
Mhm.
totally agree. I think everybody's firefighting wherever they
Yeah.
are,
Yeah.
and so everybody's fighting COVID.
Yeah.
What you actually need is once we are past this,
Mhm.
once we have full immunization, full
Mhm.
vaccination,
Mhm.
and things are controlled, people need to feel better about their future. And
Absolutely.
right?
But Neil, and going like as we move into the last part of the podcast, one thing I want to ask is about the biggest question that's bogging everyone's mind is the fuel taxes, right? Because
Yeah.
India is one country where the taxation is in percentage. I think in a lot of countries, I mean there are many countries where it's by percentage. There are some where it's lump sum. I think US there is some
Yeah.
lump sum taxation or something
Yes.
that goes on. In any case, if there was a tax structure that exists in India, if it was proposed in the Texas where I am, there would be like I don't know protests on the streets where they would drive all their SUVs and trucks. So I mean, people would be very mad, and we all, I mean, now it's about to touch 100 and stuff, and in India the petrol and diesel prices sort of deregulated right now, right? But do you think there is scope in cutting those taxes to incentivize sort of more transport thing, or you think that the government is not going to do that right now?
I think it's quite unlikely. See, I think two things. So people feel the pinch. I'll tell you. So if you look at like perception of inflation, right, is one is fuel and the other one is vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
And why is that? Because you buy them. Vegetables you probably buy them daily in India, and fuel you buy probably weekly. And
Weekly,
what
correct.
right? So that is your frequent point of paying thing for things. Whereas
Yeah.
maybe as a percentage of your consumption, it may
Mhm.
not be as large, but that's why you see, oh my God, the price is going up.
So in
Uh,
America, it's milk, meat, and fuel. That's
yes,
the sort of the thing. Yeah.
yes. And so what has happened is, uh, while like India has followed this policy of like charging this Pigovian tax and the consumption, the ones who consume more of fuel per capita, they feel are like rich enough. Uh,
Mm.
I think they have been a one-trick pony. They've slowly deregulated diesel and they went from subsidizing it to taxing it, and they've done it in a step-by-step manner. I
Mm.
think this step-by-step reform is what is probably needed in a lot of other things. So
Mm.
they went from like subsidizing diesel heavily to increasing prices by 50 paisa, 1 rupee a month, slowly, steadily. Whenever global prices fell, they actually increased tax to compensate for it. So it was flat. So the prices is ratcheting up.
Mm.
Uh, and that kind of filled the buffers last year, actually, when oil prices fell and the government could collect some tax out here, right?
Correct.
Uh, Now, even if they want to reduce this, they need to see economy picking up a lot more, growth picking up, and then maybe they reduce the taxes. This is again like pressing the accelerator, but probably that's more in 2022 or 2023 where they see other parts of the economy. I think a small cut in the tax, maybe like 25, 50 paisa a month, and gradually going down. So from the current levels, will go a long way,
Yeah.
because again that is what ignites the animal spirits, whereas actual consumption may not be that much, but this is what people feel.
Perception, na? Which is
Perception.
why petrol prices get cut before elections. People say,
Yes,
"Arey, this is that." I was like, "Why budding like 5 rupees here and there? It may sound, it may pinch a lot in the wallet, but in terms of financial policy, it does not affect the government as much as some other changes would."
yes. So I think other things is, uh, like one thing which we've not touched upon. I think the farm reforms which were done last year,
Yeah.
like somewhere. I think again there's been a communication failure. There's been a lot of vested interests. There's been a lot of opposition to it. But for example, another problem with the Indian economy is massive misallocation of resources. So what we have is a lot of subsidies consumed like in just a couple of states in Punjab and Haryana.
Yeah.
We are growing 20% more rice and wheat than we actually consume. And our FCI go downs, they're procuring rice and wheat at 20 rupees a kilo, selling it to poor at 2 rupees a kilo, and still they are left with surplus. So
Yeah.
I think what probably I think another one is try and allow like or incentivize contract production for stuff that we can export. I think Indian agri industry can be like a massive export earner. You could grow stuff which is consumed in other parts. Better cold storage, better transport linkages, which are already being done, worked on. We can export a lot of perishable vegetables. Uh, a lot of vegetables, 30% of vegetables and fruits actually rot in India. Uh, so if we reduce that even by 10, 15%, so I think these are the things again where you have like a separate ministry, people look at certain things, you incentivize via the MSPs. So we are growing while 20% extra rice and wheat, we are importing oil seeds. So for vegetable oil, for like palm oil, so the groundnut oil, we are actually importing certain pulses, certain dals. So I think these things is what can be turned around, and that improves like the Indian economy. I think incentivize people to grow those, even if it is like at times at a higher cost, because the cost of wastage on the other side is much higher. So even if
Absolutely.
it is more expensive to import, say, tur dal, something which comes from Canada. It's Punjabi farmers from India going to Canada, growing it and exporting it to India, right? Where
Yeah.
there's not a lot of dal consumption over there. And palm oil is
Absolutely.
grown in like Malaysia, Indonesia, in like
No,
the.
no.
So I think these things, these tweaks is where you could see uh, like the country kind of like misallocation of resources, if that is dealt. And these are like few small tweaks where there should be like continuous improvement, where you see, okay, how can I improve efficiency now? And this has to be long thought out over decades. And you go on that path, that itself, once people start seeing their day-to-day life improve, I think that will again kickstart the animal spirits, and hopefully the India growth story is back. And yeah, that's probably what is needed.
Absolutely. So, and that actually sums it up in terms of the recovery. Then it has to start from somewhere. Which sector the government has to choose in its own wisdom. What is the situation here? But it almost has to be parallel with the COVID vaccination sort of going on, because you cannot drop the ball on the economic recovery again while this is going on, because otherwise in 6 months we're facing a bigger disaster when we'll have a lot of the population vaccinated, but industries that haven't kicked up as fast as they should have. So
No, again, so
yeah,
India
go on,
that
go on.
no, India that way is fragile. So Nassim Taleb talks about like anti-fragility and what is robust, what is fragile. So first we would have thought that India was robust, but COVID has actually exposed us, and where you saw like first you had a very stringent lockdown, but that hurt the economy massively. And then when you kind of restrict it, saying, "Oh no, we can't hurt the economy that much because a lot of poor people will lose jobs, or people might not die. COVID, you might get it and still survive, but if of hunger, you might die." And so the trade-off which was made on the during the second wave has been to keep the economy open for a lot longer, and you saw like a much worse health crisis.
Yeah.
So again, here is we know what all was missing, what all could be done a bit better, and in parallel, while yes, agreed, health crisis is right and staring at us in our face, the other parts of the economy have to try and like build up and see what some leaks can be plugged, what tweaks can be made, so that when we come out and in like 6 months time, when we reach sort of a herd immunity with a large population vaccinated, we see like a massive rise, a lot of pent up consumption comes out there, and hopefully kickstarts the economy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, before we wrap up the podcast, Nirav, this is a tradition we have on Mind Podcast, where we always give a recommendation to our viewers, our listeners, about what to read, if you've seen a good movie or read a good book or something. So, any recommendations you have for our listeners, viewers?
Yeah, sure. So I think what I just mentioned right now was like, so Nassim Taleb has a whole series. I think he's a very arrogant person when he speaks, or on Twitter.
Twitter, no, why मैं बोल रहा हूँ, Twitter has ruined a lot of celebs, so to speak.
Yeah,
I
no.
mean,
So I can see. I think that is a part of his personality, but he has like a few original ideas. His whole series from starting, he calls it his Inserto series, and he tried to be like a very big philosopher. But taking that aside, the books are not very well written as well. But he's got original ideas. So like in Fooled by Randomness, he's saying what is the role of luck in our day-to-day lives. In Black Swan, he says about events which have like uh, a small probability event which can have a very big impact. So this COVID crisis was a black swan, though he calls it is not, because he predicted some sort of pandemic. And then he has something called a book called Anti-Fragile. And Anti-Fragile says that if you have a shock coming in, so fragile is like a glass. You throw it down, it falls and it shatters. What is robust is a piece of paper. Even if it falls off a table, it won't, right? But it doesn't change. And what is anti-fragile? Anti-fragile is when you put in stress, it actually becomes stronger. So In metallurgy, you see iron ore to steel. Our human bodies are anti-fragile. You vaccinate, you get a small dose of like either a disease or a vector, a spike protein vector, and you fall sick maybe for a day, but protects you against the big disease. So I think these series of books, they're quite original thoughts. I think they're quite interesting, thought provoking. That is what I would recommend everyone to read.
Fantastic, fantastic, Nirav. I am going to recommend a film that I saw last weekend called Ram Prasad Ki Tervi. It's on Netflix. It's by Seema Pawa, I've known, or Seema Bhargava, as she used, her maiden name when she was acting. It's a fantastic star cast from Nasir to Supriya Pathak to Manoj Pawa, and I mean, there's probably 12 or 13 theater actors, or maybe more. And it's a very, very good film on to watch. So do watch. It's a kind of humor that's been sadly missing from Hindi films lately. But OTT has provided that space to many such small films like these that can be made.
Oh,
So
I haven't seen it, so I think I'm going to watch that this week.
absolutely,
Sure.
let me know. Let me know how it was. I mean, this is the best thing to do during lockdown, anyways, right?
Absolutely.
Catch up on
Absolutely.
films. But thank you so much, Nirav. This has been a fantastic discussion. Maybe in a few weeks, a few months from now, when we are on the better side of the wave, when we are on the better side of all this, we can have another sort of a rosier picture of the economy and what steps we have taken to come out of it. And maybe we can do a live session or something with people who have questions on that. But thank you so
Sure.
much, Nirav, for joining, and thank you guys for joining us on this edition of my podcast. We'll be back next week with more. You all have a good one. Thank you.